We love a good ghost story. We like the idea of a hitchhiker or a lady in white. They're human, they have motives we understand. Revenge, sadness, maybe unfinished business. But there's a different kind of haunting. One that doesn't involve floorboards creaking or lights flickering. It's a haunting of the mind. A slow motion train wreck where the victim doesn't even realise they're off the tracks until the fire starts. Today we're looking at the case of the King in the Room. It's a story that's been passed around occult circles for decades, often attributed to a young man named David in the mid-1970s. It's a story that ends in a locked ward, but it starts with something as simple as a book. David was a skeptic. A graduate student in archaeology, he viewed the ancient world as a puzzle to be solved, not a power to be feared. In 1974, while cataloguing a private collection in upstate New York, he came across a handwritten copy of the Ars Goetia. Now, for those who don't know, the Goetia is the first section of the Lesser Key of Solomon. It's essentially a who's who of the 72 spirits, supposedly bound by King Solomon. Essentially, a blueprint of demonology. David, being a man of science, decided to conduct an experiment. He didn't believe in demons. He believed in the power of human ritual. He followed the instructions of the ninth spirit, King Paimon. He drew the circle, he wore the leman, he faced the northwest and expected nothing. But that night, the air in his apartment changed. It got thick. He described it like walking through invisible honey. And then came the sound. A faint, rhythmic thumping, like a drum playing miles away, accompanied by a high-pitched ringing that made his teeth ache. Over the next week, David stopped sleeping. Not because of fear, but because he couldn't find the off switch. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a desert. A vast, shimmering wasteland of black sand under a sun that didn't give off any light. And in the desert, a procession was moving. He saw two men in crowns leading a camel, and on that camel sat a figure with a face so beautiful, David found it to be terrifying. A face that seemed to shift between male and female with every blink. This was King Paimon. The haunting moved into the physical world. David's friends said he started speaking in a roar, a voice that sounded like several people talking all at once, distorted and overlapping. He began to obsess over the northwest corner of his room, stacking books and furniture there like an altar. He claimed the king wasn't haunting him, he was teaching him. Paimon is the master of all arts and sciences. David began solving complex mathematical theorems he had never studied. He spoke fluent Arabic, a language he had never even heard. But as his mind expanded, his body began to wither. He stopped eating. He stopped bathing. He told his sister, "The trumpets are too loud. I have to go where it's quiet." On November 12th, the police found him. He had carved the sigil of Paimon into his own chest with a fountain pen. He was staring at the northwest corner of the room, smiling, and when they asked him who he was, he couldn't give his name. He just whispered, "The king is pleased." It's a chilling tale. It has all the elements: the skeptical victim, the ancient book, tragic descent. But we have to ask ourselves, what actually happened? Some people suggest it was an example of the tulpa effect, the power of suggestion. David was an archaeology student. He knew the lore. When you deeply immerse yourself in a ritual, especially one involving sleep deprivation, your brain enters a state called hypersuggestibility. The roar he heard? That's a common auditory hallucination linked to temporal lobe epilepsy. When the temporal lobe misfires, victims often report hearing divine music, loud rushing sounds, or multiple voices. If you've been reading about King Paimon and his trumpets, guess what your brain is going to interpret the seizure as? Others suggest that maybe David was in greater danger. Remember that private collection David was cataloguing? Ancient manuscripts and artifacts from that era were often preserved using mercury and arsenic. Chronic mercury poisoning, Mad Hatter's disease, causes tremors, extreme emotional instability, speech distortion, and most tellingly, hallucinations. David wasn't being possessed by a king of the Northwest. He was likely breathing in a 200-year-old toxic dust. If this story sounds familiar, it's probably because it's the skeleton of almost every modern Paimon creepypasta. The film Hereditary even took those scattered true accounts and distilled them into a pop culture nightmare. The reality is, there is no evidence of a David in the 1974 Connecticut police records that fits this description. The story is a modern apocrypha, a tale that grows on the telling, fueled by our collective fear of losing our minds to something we invited in. We want to believe that evil is an external force, a king on a camel coming to take our souls. It's easier to fight a demon and a camel than it is to fight a chemical imbalance or a fracturing psyche. But maybe that's the real trap of the Goetia. The book tells you that you're summoning a spirit, but what you're actually doing is maybe opening a door into the basement of your own consciousness. And once you start poking around in the dark with a flashlight, you might not like what looks back. Whether Paimon is an ancient entity or just a name we give our own burgeoning madness, the result is the same. David didn't lose his soul to a demon. He lost himself to an idea. And ideas are the things that are truly immortal. So let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this story? But in the meantime, keep your eyes open and maybe stay away from the old books for a while. Oh, and subscribe.